Team 10 from the University of Houston's Bauer College of Business, Administration of Computer-Based Systems course. My name is Stephen Jordan, and we'll be presenting to you today on the topic of Dunbar's number for the Administration of Computer-Based MIS course taught by Professor Carl Scott here at the university. Again, I'm Stephen Jordan, we're Team 10, and this is
Charley Lee.
Jackie Chen.
So what is Dunbar's number? Well, in short, Dunbar's number is a theorized limit of the human's cognitive ability to keep up with social relationships, but that's a lot of words. So really what it is Dunbar took previous studies to come out with a number that he thought a person would be limited in his ability to maintain stable social relationships. So not just to know people, but to know them well enough that you would actually consider them part of a stable relationship. And through his studies, he came up with an average number of 148. But it's commonly rounded to 150, and that's what we know today as Dunbar's number. And this number is actually part of a range. It's not a solid number. That number was the average. So it's in the middle of a larger range that, that Dunbar was able to extrapolate from his studies of cognitive abilities.
Now, Stephen had mentioned earlier the range, which is pretty much the relationship a person should be able to maintain. Now, the numbers associated with that range are between 100 to 230, and the average number of that is about 150. So, 95% of that time you'll be falling between anywhere above or below 150 within that Dunbar range.
So we are going to talk about stable social relationship, and stable social relationship is defined as knowing how each of these social relationships relate to one another. So for example, we know Sarah and Susie. And we also know the relationship between Sarah and Susie. And we also have the information independently between Sarah and Susie.
Okay, so there's got to be a better way to define what a stable social relationship is than just saying that you know how two things relate to one another. So in our research, we found a book by Robin Dunbar himself, and it's called How Many Friends Does One Person Need? Dunbar's Number and Other Evolutionary Quirks. And in this book, he provides an example of the kind of relationship he's talking about. In this airport that he provides, it talks about if you were at an airport and you're walking through a busy terminal and you pass by somebody and you realize that you know them. But not only do you realize that you know them, you feel obligated to go and talk to them. And if you didn't go and talk to them, they might even be offended that you didn't. That's the kind of friendship that he was talking about. That's the kind of stable social relationship that he was talking about. Not so much as being able to walk past somebody in the airport and simply nod your head and hello at them, but to have to feel the need to go and talk to them and interact with them on that level. And that is an example of a stable social relationship that is a little easier to process.
There are a couple exceptions to Dunbar's 150 average. As far as past relationships that you no longer wish to pursue anymore, such as childhood relationships that you had, a close friend as growing up as a child, that in the future or in the near future that you no longer want to go ahead and continue pursuing that relationship. You might have a deep bond prior to that when you were kids, but as far as when you grew up, you feel the need not to go ahead and continue pursuing that relationship.
And the second exception is, for example, is like when you go to the airport and you knock to the other person, but you do not talk to them. This is an example of irregular acquaintance.
So now we're asking ourselves, what was Dunbar's point? Well, what he was doing was he was setting these limits, the ability to maintain these stable social relationship limits by looking at previous studies that had been done that related the size of a primate's neocortex to their ability to have these stable social relationships. And so it's pretty necessary to define the neocortex and how that all relates to the study, because it's a little bit technical and we want to make sure we cover all our bases.
So what is the neocortex? The neocortex is known as the neopallium or the isocortex, which is the outermost layer of the brain. It's the region of the brain matter that is known to be associated with higher level brain functions such as social interactions. So let's go ahead and draw a comparison. You have a tomato and you have an orange. You peel back the skin on both of them. You'll notice that the tomato is really thin, but you'll notice that the rind on the orange is really thick and really dense, and you compare that with the neocortex. So it has since it's so much thicker, it has more of a capacity to control social interactions. So you increase the ability to have them.
So what we're really saying is that because the orange has more volume, the rind would equate to more volume, making that comparison. You could say that if they were animate objects and if they were primates, such as in the study, that the orange would have that greater capacity.
So what is Dunbar's focus? Dunbar was taking studies that related the volume of the neocortex of the brain to social limitations in primates, and then using these theories to extrapolate that such a number must exist for humans as well. The study were showing the neocortex functioning like a computer CPU. The more processing capacity you have, the more you can process and multitask. Just like you have a new computer with more CPUs and RAMs than an old computer, so you have more ability and capacity to multitask.
Now with that, Dunbar didn't take consideration with modern times. He wanted to take it back to pre-industrial times, as far back as ancient times. And basically what he found with the hunters and gatherers, that they had tribes of about 2,500 members, and then within that tribe, they would break down into groups of about 150.
So the number was holding true, even though it was all the way back in ancient times.
And it's still true nowadays. For example, like a military company, the size of the company is still 150 for a group.
So approximately this number is carried all throughout time, from the beginning to much more modern times. But we're going to take a look at how modern times and how Dunbar's number applies to modern times. So as we've seen, Dunbar has applied his number across time. One might begin to think, what about modern times? And will it ring true for you? So what we do is, you need to remember to take Dunbar's number with a grain of salt. 150 or 148 is a specific number, or the common average that's known of 150. It's just that, it's an average, it's part of a range. And like we said before, 95% of sample results will fall in that range, but you could be the exception to the rule. So just remember that it may not apply in every case, but it should apply in most, and that's what Dunbar was trying to get across to everybody.
So as far as future studies go, Dunbar is looking to take into consideration modern times. And what he's going to do with that is incorporate Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn and other social media. Now that number might expand because the average Facebook user has about 200 friends. So that number might change from the 150 that's conceived from the ancient times and the pre-industrialized times. Now we're going to go ahead and incorporate that with the new medias, such as social media, such as Facebook and Twitter, that go ahead and expand the mediums for other people to communicate with other people. So
basically what we want to say is that Dunbar is looking to relate his previous number to modern times and see if technology has influenced our capacity, much like getting a bigger neocortex would have. He wants to see if technology is able to do the same things for us and expand our ability to maintain stable social relationships.
So, as an example, if you go to your Facebook account, if you have one, and take a look at your friends, probably like a friends that has 1,000 friends on their friends list, but if you take a look at their close friends list, the number of their friends is probably more closely to Dunbar's number, which is 150.
So if you'd like to find out more information related to Dunbar's number and Robin Dunbar himself, you can check any of our citations list. You can check out Robin Dunbar's book, How Many Friends Does One Person Need? Dunbar's Number and Other Evolutionary Quirks. Or you can check Wikipedia to find your information needs.